We welcome in our good friend, the man, the myth, the legend from Sports Talk 790 and Locked On SEC Podcast, Chris Gordy. I love that shirt, buddy. What's going on?
What's up, man? Yeah, this is a shirt I ordered a couple years ago. It was Burrow Chase 22 for the Super Bowl year. They got there and did not win, but it was one of those things where I ordered the shirt just ahead of the Super Bowl, and it was coming from one of those weird like Chinese companies that I didn't know where the sender was.
Right.
And I got the box and literally had a box of 50 of these. So now they're like my throwaway shit. Like I cut the grass in them. I play by the pool in them. So if you want one, I only have them in 2X, but I could shoot you one if you want a Burrow Chase t-shirt.
Dude, I mean, well, did you pay for 50 or they just sent you 50?
I paid for one. That's the best part is like I
bought
one.
That's what you call a box of 50.
Yeah, and there was no return label. Like I wanted to send it back, but there was no return label, and it was in Chinese. I'm like, I don't know where this came from, but
all I'm gonna say is, man, I'm so Italian. I'd be selling them things on the street corner come Super Bowl time. I'm just gonna tell you, Chris, right now.
I was giving away for free because we were all rooting for the Bengals in that Super Bowl against the Rams, but you know how it played out.
Hopefully, Joe Burrow can get back here. Man, I'm really excited to have you on, Chris. We start college football this weekend, technically. SEC starts next week, and I want to go around the SEC with you because I know that your knowledge about this conference and this game is second to none. I think I got to start off with the biggest news that we have for the entire season that I think that we haven't talked much about. We talked about it when he retired. Chris, are we not mentioning the ripple effect of Nick Saban not being a head coach at Alabama is going to bring this season, or am I just crazy? Like, I feel like there's going to be big impact that he is not the head coach at Alabama. Your thoughts?
Yeah, look, we knew there was going to be a drop-off, at least a little bit, when the greatest coach of all time retired. And I feel like, man, like I feel like a lot of national people and regional people, for that matter, have gotten wrapped up in this narrative that, oh, Kalen DeBoer is an awesome coach. And look, he might be. I mean, he just took Washington to the playoff, and great. You know, they get to the national championship game and lose. But there's too many people throwing out there Kalen DeBoer's record as a head coach. Oh, he's 104-12. Oh, he's 104-12. Yeah, 67-3 of that was at Sioux Falls. I'm sorry, we don't include that in this conversation. Like, this is big boy football, and like to me, this and there are people who made the parallels about Brian Kelly because people are like, oh, Brian Kelly. I mean, he started Grand Valley State. Yeah, when we talk about Brian Kelly, we kind of ignore the Grand Valley State because why? After the Grand Valley State, where he was awesome, he had 3 great years at Central Michigan. He had a great run at Cincinnati, where he won 3 straight years of double-digit wins at Cincinnati. Then a decade at Notre Dame, where he takes them to a national championship, double-digit wins and all this. Brian Kelly's track record as a head coach is way more accomplished than Kalen DeBoer. So if we're going to take out Grand Valley State days for Brian Kelly, let's take out Sioux Falls for Kalen DeBoer. And what's he done? He was a head coach at Fresno State. His first year in 2020 went 3-3, the COVID year. In year 2, he went 9-3. And then 2 years at Washington, he went 11-2 and 14-1. To me, like, we don't know what the hell Kalen DeBoer is as a head coach, in my opinion, especially at this level, at the Division I level. So, look, again, not to say he can't be a head coach, but my God, man, people are really just put on the blinders and be like, oh, Bama, they're just going to keep the sustained excellence going. And look, to their credit, they've done a great job of recruiting. They've got all these big recruits these last couple of weeks. On the national level, they're not even recruiting from the state of Alabama. They're recruiting them on the national level. And I guarantee you about 50-60% of those are Saban getting on the phone as a closer going, hey, yeah, it's Coach Saban, blah, blah, blah. Those kids are all going to decommit if Bama loses games. Like, that's great because they're still carrying over the excellence of the Saban years. But this program could certainly start to unravel if they, if they start to lose some games and the offense doesn't look great. And I'm here to tell you, like, this is a tough damn schedule that Alabama's got this year for people just going, oh, they're in the playoff. Oh, they're in the playoff. I'm like, well, can we at least dissect, like, week 3 at Wisconsin is no cakewalk? Like, that's not the easiest place to play. Right. I get Wisconsin's, been that rebuilding phase of trying to get back to where they once were, but like, it's not an easy place to play. If Jalen Milroe struggles at all, turns the ball over, suddenly you're in a tight game there. Need I remind you about the South Florida debacle last year? Then after that, it's Georgia at home. You get them at home, but Georgia's still absolutely loaded with more talent than anybody in the country. Their 2 biggest road games at Tennessee and at LSU, Remind you, last time they went both those places, they lost, and that was with Nick Saban as the head coach. Now it's Kalen DeBoer, and he's just going to go in there and win those 2 games. Missouri should be a tough home game. At Oklahoma is going to be tough. And, of course, the Iron Bowl is always a dogfight. So I just say that to say, like, Kalen DeBoer could be a pretty good coach, and Bama could still lose 3 games this year. Like, the schedule is tough. And so you're absolutely right. We're ignoring – everybody's just in love with the Bama brand, the Bama brand, the Bama brand. You know, some people made this mistake the year Tom Brady left New England. I saw people, the Patriots are still the Patriots. No, Tom Brady is gone. Bill Belichick was human without him. You know, it's kind of the opposite here. The quarterback's back in Milroe, who everybody loved at the end of last year, but Saban's gone. And is Kalen DeBoer that guy? The brand of Bama can only, it can only shine so bright until we get on the football field. And if they lose a couple games, man, this thing is, the dynasty is dead will be a legitimate topic.
Chris, you brought up about the record to start off with, and the only thing that kept going through my mind was, people when they talk about Brian Kelly, they say he's not a national champion. He hasn't won a national championship. I'm like, he won one at Grand Valley State. But y'all bring that up for Kalen DeBoer, but you, like you mentioned, you don't bring that up for a guy like Kelly, which I think is very interesting. Chris, I wasn't going to spend this much time on Bama, but I got to ask you another one. Did you see Kalen DeBoer? 2 things. The thing with the kicker today was really funny, I thought, but then it pissed me off because I'm like, can we just go after tampering? Like, if there's one thing we can fix, can we go after tampering? But secondly, I think the biggest thing with them is that he's been continuously mentioned about how their secondary doesn't look good. And if Jalen Milroe is throwing the ball, lighting up that secondary up, now what? So you're going into a place like with Garrett Nussmeier, you have Carson Beck, you go to Oklahoma, as you mentioned. By the way, Missouri doesn't suck offensively. Those are the things that really would concern me if I'm a Bama fan at the current moment.
Yeah, and this is where you're really going to start to see, them losing a lot of those pieces from that team last year.
Right.
Kool-Aid McKinstry off to the pros. Trey Amos hit the transfer portal. They bring back Malachi Moore, but, Terrion Arnold was one of their big-time playmakers a year ago. He's gone. So, they've recruited well there. They've got some nice, DBs that they think that they can kind of work in. And obviously they bring in Keon Sapp from Michigan at safety. But, Damani Jackson comes in through the portal. And then some freshmen like Red Morgan, Xavier Mincy, Xavier Brown. These are all guys that Bama wants to get early playing time. And by the way, their schedule sets up great. They get 2 home games against Western Kentucky and South Florida, tune-up games to get these 5-star freshmen their feet under them. But to your point, we become so accustomed under Nick Saban, that secondary, what was Saban's bread and butter? He always coached that secondary. They were always studs. If that secondary struggles this year, we could see a Bama team that looks a little bit like LSU from last year, where it's Jalen Milroe on the offense scoring a ton, but they're winning games 51-45 and, getting into some shootouts. And so that's going to be very intriguing. I mean, I'm really curious to see. We'll see what Wisconsin looks like if they can throw the football at all. But, man, like that Georgia game becomes so interesting because Carson Beck can fling it. They got some weapons still. Everybody's making too much of a big deal about, they lost Brock Bowers, Lad McConkey. Yeah, they still got some other dudes in that, on that offense.
Found their next big white wide receiver. Did you see Kirby the other day? He's out there saying this kid Spears or whatever his name was. He goes, oh, man, this kid's like Lad McConkey. And I'm like, of course you found a white kid from the Hillbilly Hicks of Georgia that can out there and run. So I'm all in on Georgia, which we'll get to them in just a second.
Yeah.
So, Chris, if Bama does take that step back, a lot of people's question had been Ole Miss. Because of what they did in the portal, you have a quarterback like Jackson Dart returning. You have a really good wide receiver room, and we know what Lane can do and what, quite honestly, Pete can do by calling plays. When you look at Ole Miss, what do you think of them right now going into the season?
If they had brought back Quinshon Judkins, I would have them hands down a preseason top 5 team, possibly top 2 or 3. I mean, I thought Quinshon Judkins made them that complete. And what's so interesting is, when we think about the SEC, we think Lane Kiffin at Ole Miss and Josh Heupel at Tennessee, and we think, high-flying offenses, throw it around a ton. But what the underrated part about both those offenses is they've run the football very effectively. Tennessee and Ole Miss they've been top 5 in the SEC in rushing the football the last couple of years. And so you got to have that balance. And I think losing Quinshon Judkins, look, Ole Miss fans did all the typical thing. They're like, they lose him and they're like, oh, we didn't want him. Oh, he wasn't bought in. Oh, he wanted NIL. All this stuff. They're like, oh, we don't want him. And the hard reality is he was their best running back that they've had in years in Oxford. And to lose him to Ohio State, I mean, it makes the rich get richer. Ohio State's roster is absolutely loaded. But look, Ulysses Bentley's a nice back who had some nice years at SMU, but he ain't a lead back. Can they get this done running back by committee? Henry Parrish started at Ole Miss, transferred to Miami. He's back at Ole Miss. They bring in Rashad Amos through the portal. I don't think it's a deep enough room, running back room of quality backs. And that's what makes me wonder if Ole Miss struggles to run the football at all and have that balance, and they're throwing it 60 times a game. Quinshon or Jackson Dart's good. The offensive line is solid. They got some good pass catching weapons. Trey Harris is going to be one of the best in the SEC. They're bringing Juice Wells from South Carolina, but I just wonder, can they survive doing that? And the schedule is weak sauce. I mean, their toughest non-conference game is at Wake Forest. Like, give me 4 wins in the non-con. Give me a home win against Kentucky. Road win at Florida. Probably road wins at South Carolina and Arkansas. Really, you're talking about a 3-game season for Ole Miss. It's at LSU. It's home for Oklahoma, and it's home for Georgia. Now, some people may poo-poo the Oklahoma. I still think Oklahoma, by October, Jackson Arnold may be high-flying, and that offense may be humming, and that's going to be a tough out. But really, if you want to give them the win in Oklahoma, then it's at LSU, and it's home for Georgia. And if they lose both of those, which, by the way, they've not won in Death Valley since 2008 when Houston Nutt was the head coach, you give them losses in both that, they're still 10-2, and they're making the playoffs. So something would have to go dramatically wrong for Ole Miss to be 9-3 or worse. But I'm just telling you right now, watch that run game. They open with Furman and Middle Tennessee, so I don't think we're going to get a great read. Like, if Ulysses Bentley has a 100-yard rushing game in both those games, I can't put like a ton of stock in and go, oh, they're going to be just fine. But we're going to find out when they get against Kentucky and then on the road against South Carolina. If they struggle to run the football, Blake, I'm looking at Ole Miss saying, ooh, you guys, if you're one-dimensional going into that LSU game, Oklahoma, Georgia, you're going to take some L's.
Well, you talk about Oklahoma. Look, their offense might have their offensive line might be a massive question mark. Jackson Arnold's going there as a first-time starter. That defense is nasty, buddy. Good luck. And look, I'm trying to warn LSU fans. Like, bro, their D-line, their linebackers, their secondary, good luck, man. You're going to find out very quickly.
Yeah.
Did you see the BK troll on the Coca-Cola with the smart water getting after Kiffin? What'd you think?
So that's the prime reason why Lane Kiffin will never be a big-time head coach at a big-time program, because he's stupid. Like, you can't do those things. That Coke is paying the bills, dummy. Like, don't hate on the sponsor. Years ago on radio, we had a national buy from Buffalo Wild Wings, and one of our radio hosts got on and was like, man, I was just had a terrible experience at Buffalo Wild Wings last night. We're going, dude, shut it. They are a sponsor. Don't put that on your social media if you want. Don't say it on the radio. They're paying for the sponsor. If you're like giving Coke, they didn't just put a Coke bottle up there because they thought it would look cool. Coke bought that. Don't say who drinks Coke anymore. Dummy. That's why you're an Ole Miss head coach. That's why you'll never be head coach at Bama. That's why Bama didn't even call you. Bama had an opening. They got shut down by, Sark and Mike Norvell and all these people. Like, what about Lane? No, hell no. Who's next? DeBoer. Go get DeBoer.
You know what's funny too? I saw this. I didn't dig into it because I had so much going on. But the thing that came out about a book that's coming out and the conversation that, like, Nick was pissed off at Jimmy Sexton for allowing him to hire Lane Kiffin, and he called him narcissistic. And I'm like, well, buddy, you are too. But You know what? The thing is you're right. It's smart by BK and it's dumb by Lane, because you're right. Look, bro, you've been out there complaining about not having money, and then now you're going after your own money, right? Like, I mean, what are you doing? Like, those are the things that I think gets Lane in so much trouble. I will say this though. Here was my hot take this whole off season. I want to get your reaction. I think Billy goes bye-bye, and I think Lane Kiffin is the next head coach of Florida.
Yeah, people have floated that out there. I still think Florida thinks of themselves as a better like, we can do better than Lane Kiffin. Like, they think of themselves as a program that's played for championship. Steve Spurrier and Urban Meyer years, like, that's the peak. That's the pinnacle where Florida wants to get back to. Right. Lane Kiffin ain't getting them to that. So, they'll have their sights set higher than that. But to your contrary, I had Phil Steele on our show a couple weeks ago. Phil's high on Napier. Phil thinks that Billy Napier is going to win 8 or 9 games this year at Florida.
Let's get to them. Chris, come on. 8 games.
Look, I'll say this. We've talked so much about the schedule and how brutal it is. And oh my God, they're one of the toughest schedules in the country. And look at that stretch on the back stretch of the season. You know what we haven't talked enough about, Blake? Florida's got some talent on the team.
They do.
Graham Mertz is a good veteran quarterback who's going to take care of the football, doesn't turn the ball over, doesn't throw picks, takes care of it in the red zone. They execute in the red zone. They lose Trevor Etienne to the portal, goes to Georgia. But Montrell Johnson, I think a combination of him and Trayon Webb can get it done. Offensive line's been retooled a little bit. Trey Wilson at wide receiver, I think, is going to be one of the best receivers in the SEC this year. And watch DJ Lagway. I watched this kid in the state of Texas, 5-star quarterback, one of the top recruits in the country. He went to Florida. He's going to play this year. I think I've even heard rumblings that there's going to be packages almost like, remember Chris Leak Tebow? Tebow got on campus. They're like, this kid's too damn talented. Just sit on the sideline. They built packages for him in the red zone, the jump pass against LSU. I think they're going to have things like that for DJ Lagway. And I think it becomes that thing of like, hey, if you fire Napier, Lagway's going to the portal. He ain't sticking it out in Florida. So like, you keep Billy. If they get to at least 6-6, they get to a bowl game, the future looks bright with Lagway next year. The schedule gets a little bit easier. I think Napier saves his job. Everybody's put him on the hot seat, and he's dead. Now, he's got to win this Miami game week 1. Don't forget that. But, like, I've heard enough compelling arguments that Florida's got enough talent on their roster that they can win some games. Somebody say they're going to win. They're going to beat LSU. Look, going there is always tough to the Swamp.
Yeah, I'm not. I talked about this week, because look, Brian Kelly's let us out at practice. If Garrett Nussmeier goes in there and makes a couple bad decisions like he's done at practice or like he's done in his career, I could see somebody at Florida pick sixing him and you being in trouble. I mean, you remember Burrow going in there in 18 and losing, right? Like that was one of the toughest games that Burrow played. Chris, here's my thing with Florida though, man. I do think that they're going to be better. I don't think that I think Miami is more talented than them. Like, I think that I think they do have talent, but the problem is so does everybody else that's on their schedule. Now, could they beat an LSU? Could they beat a Florida State? Could they beat where are the game? Like, I think they're better, but who are they better than on that schedule would be my thing.
The key is this. Let's just, again, for argument's sake, assume they find a way to beat Miami next week at home. You're at home, by the way. You're not on the road. You're at home in the Swamp. Prove that Swamp used to be one of the most treacherous places to play. Prove that it still is. I know it's a day game, 3:30 Eastern. Win that damn game. You're going to beat Samford the next week. You're going to have a great chance to beat an overrated A&M team in week 3. You're going to have a great chance to go on the road, beat Mississippi State, a bad Mississippi State team in Starkville week 4. And then you're home against UCF, which people are hyping up KJ Jefferson as if he's the next coming of Cam Newton. I'm going, last time I watched this guy at Arkansas, he freaking stunk. So those are the key games. If they're 5-0, Blake, I only need one more win the rest of the way. And I'm looking at that home game against Kentucky, which has been a dogfight in recent years. Kentucky's finally started winning that rivalry, but they can win at Tennessee. Didn't they beat Tennessee last year?
Yeah, they did.
The backstretch is tough. Beating Georgia, Texas, LSU, Ole Miss, Florida State. Find me a win in there. It's going to be tough. But to me, the key is the start. If they could start 5-0, I think Napier's already saved his job at that point.
Chris, you know what's so interesting? You know that Billy and Florida were 5-2 to start the season?
Yeah.
5-2. And then it's just that brutal stretch down. I mean, Chris, here's the thing. The worst team that they played down the stretch was LSU, who had the Heisman Trophy winning quarterback, like last year. And I'm like, dude, that's got to be the most brutal thing.
They should have beat Arkansas. I mean, they blew that game.
That's true too. You said you were talking about Florida and you brought up an overrated A&M. You're in the state of Texas, so I want to go there about both of those teams. Chris, I agree that I think A&M, like a lot of people, are a little too high on them. But then I look at that D line and that front seven, and I'm like, a lot of people high on Connor Wigman. I'm like, well, yeah, maybe I could see it. But what are your thoughts about A&M going into the season under new head coach and Mike Elko?
I think this. Look, they hit rock bottom they buy out Jimbo, and They try to rally the troops. They have a lot of guys at the transfer portal. All those guys that were part of that, great recruiting class a couple years ago, the majority of them are all gone. They go into the offseason. They're looking to hire a head coach. They settle on Mark Stoops from Kentucky, who, by the way, he's the winningest head coach in the history of Kentucky. He surpassed Air Bryant there. He's a great head coach, for Kentucky standards. I think he would have done a good job at A&M.
I do too.
They poo-poo it. They're like, no, we don't want him, blah, blah, blah. Let's go get Mike Elko. And I'm going, wait a minute. The Duke head coach? Like, I get he was your DC. I get you probably had one of your best years defensively, when he was the DC under Jimbo. But, like, he's going to come in and be your savior as head coach. And so and then along the evolution, Blake, we go from, look, Elko's a decent head coach. Oh, look, he's done some good things in the transfer portal. To suddenly, I think A&M could be 6-6. Then somewhere in January, February, we're like, I think A&M could win 7 games. Look at who they've added in the portal. To somewhere in April and May, I start hearing people go, A&M, they could be an 8-9 win team. To suddenly, a few weeks ago, they're a preseason top 20 team. Right. And I'm going, when did this happen? You know what this reminded me of, Blake? When a high school kid on 24/7 Sports is a 4-star at the end of December, and then by April, he's a 5-star, and he hasn't played a game at all. The kid somehow went from a 4-star to a 5-star. I'm like, wait, he hasn't done anything to prove that he's gone from a 4 to a 5-star. That's what A&M is. You've done nothing.
Aaron Anderson is you just described Aaron Anderson's senior year, right? Yeah. Like he decommits, he commits to Bama, and he was a 5-star, the number 1 player in the state.
Yeah. So I mean, that's where I am with A&M. Like, I don't think they're bad. I think they could end up being good. But I think they're going to go through a little bit of growing pains in year 1 under Elko. To your point, I think the defense is going to be good. Nick Scorton, I think, is going to be candidate for Defensive Player of the Year. I think he's going to lead the SEC in sacks. But why are we so sold on Connor Wigman? Like, we act like
I'm with you on that.
I mean, I saw some people saying, some draft experts, he could be a first-round pick next year. I'm like, based on what? Like, give me his best 2 wins since he's been a starter at A&M. Like, I got to see a full season of it. He couldn't even stay healthy last year. He played, couple games and got hurt. So, I think A&M, like, look, could they get abused next weekend against Notre Dame and really expose that they're not quite ready? Yeah, that could certainly happen. But, look, give them a little bit of hat tip if you're an LSU fan. Last 2 times LSU's been to College Station, they've lost. So, it's a game that they get up for. They think it's a rivalry. I know most LSU fans still don't think it is, but I look at A&M and they could be a dangerous team, but I think we're putting the cart before the horse. They're not a preseason top 25 team. They shouldn't be.
My DMs on Twitter, I've had multiple videos about A&M that have hit like close to 500,000 views on Twitter. My DMs showed me that this is a rivalry to them. They hate my guts. So when they see this, just be prepared for them to come after you too. Let me just ask you this one more thing on A&M very quickly. Colin Klein. I don't know if I'm sold on him. Let me tell you why. When we watched Kansas State, because when me and Joe, my co-host on the National College Football Show, I'm like, Joe, you can't go call plays east and west in this league. You got to get north and south. Chris, I'm not saying he's not a good hire. I'm just saying that sometimes when you come into this conference, some of the shit you get away with in the Big 12, you're not going to get away with here in the SEC. Am I crazy?
Well, they're going to have to run the football effectively, and losing Ruben Owens really hurts in that department. He's a kid that was a stud from the Houston area that was expected to take a big leap. Look, you still got Levy and Moss and Amari Daniels, and those were the guys who were going to split, bulk of the duties, but they were expecting Ruben Owens to come in and pick up a big chunk of that load this year, and now he's lost for the year. Emmitt Smith's son, EJ Smith, no offense, but he got his degree at Stanford and he's looking to just finish out his college career. I don't think he's going to make much of an impact, but to me, it's about these receivers. Moose Muhammad's been around a while.
I like him a lot, by the way. Yeah. Side note, sorry, but I like him a lot.
Ja'Day Walker came on last year. Noah Thomas is the guy everybody's talking about as the next big thing. They lose Evan Stewart, who was the big 5-star receiver who really played well for them. Micah Tease is an interesting kid. He played well in the bowl game for them. And then they bring in a freshman, Terry Bussey. So they got weapons. And by the way, at tight end, they get Donovan Green, their dynamic freshman who they lost last year. He's back. They bring in Trey Watson through the portal. So they've got weapons. But I'm with you. You want a hot take? A&M downgraded at offensive coordinator this offseason.
Oh!
I think Bobby Petrino, had they been able to hang on to him and keep him there, that this offense would have been in better hands. I mean, I like what we saw from the offense the first couple games last year before Wigman got hurt, and that derailed everything. But look at what he was able to get out of freaking, was it Jalen Henderson at the end? Like, they were in a game with LSU. Like, the offense was pretty good. But I'm with you. It's been a mixed bag of what I've heard on Colin Klein. Aggie fans, don't ask them. They think it's a home run hire, hands down. But most people I've talked to have said, kind of mixed feelings on him, and they don't know if he's going to be the right guy for that job.
Yeah, that's going to be very interesting. Let's stay in Texas. You were talking about the running game. A couple more. Do you have a couple more teams we can talk about before we get you out of here? Am I keeping you too long? Okay.
No, let's do it.
Texas. Chris, I kept them out of my playoff mainly due to the fact that I just don't know that you can come into this league and have games like you did against Kansas and Houston. I know in one of them you had a backup quarterback. I get that. You do that against a team like Kentucky, you're going to get beat, right? Like, you can't come in this league and have games like that. I even think about the Wyoming game, right? And I get that, it's Wyoming. It is what it is, but you can't do that either. What should we expect, in your opinion, from Texas year one in the SEC?
So I'm kind of with you. I'm not all aboard the Texas hype train. I said this about, all season about Steve Sarkisian, how he suddenly all of a sudden overnight becomes an elite head coach when his whole history of his career has been average,
right?
Average good. I bring this up all the time. His best season at Washington, he was 8-4. His best season at USC, he was 9-4. And his best season at Texas prior to last year was 8-5. That's who Steve Sarkisian is as a head coach. He's an 8-9 win coach. It's pretty good. I mean, most schools would take that, but to assume 12-2 he's just going to do this every year from now on. Like, no, that's not how this works. Like, you don't just, like, Nick Saban does that. He wins 10, 12 games and then does it every year. Kirby Smart's kind of gotten into that realm. Sark's not there yet. Like, you're still rebuilding at Texas. And by the way, they just lost a ton to the draft. He's been recruiting great, but let's not just act like losing Tavondre Sweat and Byron Murphy and all these dudes to the draft, A.D. Mitchell. And yeah, they're just, next man up. No, you're Texas. Like, you're the same ones that Tom Herman and Sam Ellinger stood on the podium in New Orleans and said, we're back. And guess what? You weren't back.
We're back.
Like, you got to prove it. You got to go 11-1, make a deep playoff run, like, to prove to me that you're back. And my biggest issue is Quinn Ewers loses basically all his, majority of his weapons to a wide receiver. They bring in some good pieces through the portal, but Isaiah Bond, talk to any Alabama fan. Isaiah Bond won like the number one guy at Alabama last year. It's not like he's this absolute stud. He made some nice plays. Matthew Golden from Houston was pretty good, but I don't know if he's a stud. Silas Bolden from Oregon State put up some good numbers. Ryan Wingo, the incoming freshman, I think is the real deal. But like, there's a big C word, Blake. You got to develop chemistry with these guys. And he developed that chemistry with those receivers last year, but they're all gone. And now you lose CJ Baxter and you got to lean on Jaden Blue to carry the bulk of the load of the running game. I keep telling people this, watch Texas in week 2. If they go to Michigan, I know Michigan's lost a ton, but if they go to Michigan and they can't run the football and they have to become one-dimensional and Quinn Ewers has to keep throwing and they have to win a game that way, Michigan's got some pretty good DBs still, man. I would.
Johnson's the best corner in the country.
Dude, you pick him off a couple times. And by the way, Quinn Ewers did that in the Oklahoma game last year. Started the game. He threw 2 early picks and nearly cost them the game. They take the lead late and then they still lose. So, yeah, man. I just
Oklahoma too, Chris.
Yeah,
I mean, he had 2 big turnovers.
I'm a little bit. I look at Texas and I just say, are they the real deal? Like, and you're just going to come in year 1 in the SEC and run roughshod? Like, this isn't Baylor and Kansas. Like, everyone's making a big deal. Oh, they got an easy schedule. They get number 1 Georgia. They got to play them. They got to play Oklahoma, a rivalry which they have not owned in the last decade plus. That Oklahoma has dominated that rivalry the last 10, 15 years. They got to go to A&M, and I know I poo-pooed on A&M a little bit, but do you realize A&M is going to treat that like it's their Super Bowl? They're going to put everything they have into that game. I've been saying all offseason, my one lock of the year, A&M is beating Texas in College Station. That game, look at ticket prices for that game. It's over $1,000 to get into the stadium for that game right now. They're going to treat it like they treated the LSU game 2 years ago. Remember that?
Right.
They had 4 wins, but they suddenly got healthy. Devon Achane got back. Moose Muhammad got back. They put everything they had in that game, and they beat LSU's butt right after LSU had just beat Alabama, oh, we won the West, we're going to Atlanta. A&M said, yeah, bleep that, we're beating you. And
Right.
they did it. They're going to do that to Texas. And I think Texas has at least 2-3 losses this year. They don't make the playoff. And it's a big welcome to the SEC. And I think there's 15 other fan bases in this conference that look at Texas and go, told you so. You wanted to be in this conference? This is what the SEC is.
I fully agree with everything you just said there. All right, two more I want to get to LSU with you last year. Chris, I put Missouri in my playoff. I couldn't not. It's just because the way that their schedule lines up, and I do think offensively with Brady Cook, Luther Burden, Theo Weiss, Marcus Carroll, who LSU saw last year at running back at Georgia State, dude, murdered dudes in the SEC. But then the last week, Chris, I started to really question my pick here for another SEC team. If there's an SEC sleeper and you had to pick Missouri or Tennessee, who would you go with?
Oh, man. Here's the problem with Missouri. I don't know if you're necessarily a sleeper anymore when you just won double-digit.
That's fair. That's fair.
You won double-digit games. You just beat Ohio State in the Cotton Bowl. Like, that's just so weird. Like, Ohio State is automatically what? Preseason top 2-3?
Yeah.
And Missouri's outside the top 10 looking at number 11. I'm like, wait. Like, that's not – did the Cotton Bowl happen? Did I not see them beat Ohio State? It's not like Ohio State had a ball. We had 10 of our starters out. Or, like Florida State. Oh, we were so banged up. No, you had the bulk of your team in that game, and you lost. So I do think, like, for respect-wise, Missouri should have opened the season as a top 10 team. I think Drink's going to use that as disrespect. Oh, 11, really? We're not even preseason top 10? Mm-hmm. I think he's going to use that to their credit. But I'm kind of with you. Like, you bring back Luther Burden, one of the best wide receivers in the country. You bring back, Brady Cook at quarterback. But somebody did bring this up to me. Go look at Luther Burden's stats last year and look at where the bulk of the yardage and touchdowns came from against the crappier opponents.
Yeah. In
the bigger games, he struggled. It wasn't as easy. So that's kind of intriguing to me. But look, the schedule sets up, what's their toughest games? Obviously, at Alabama is their toughest. At A&M is tough. Home for Oklahoma is tough. But again, same thing as Ole Miss. Like we said, you lose 2 of those, you're 10-2. You should be in the conversation for the playoff. But I really wonder, Blake, because last season at this time, we were talking about Eli Drinkwitz, a guy on the hot seat. A guy on, like, can he win big here? And now all of a sudden we're talking about he's an elite coach. Again, same thing with Sarkisian. Like, is this who you are? Is 11-2 who you are? Or is it 5-5, 6-7, 6-7? And that's what you did the 3 years prior. History tells me you're more that guy than the 11-2 guy. And so that's where I say, the regression to the mean is what we always say in analytics. The regression to the mean is Missouri comes back down. 8-9 win seasons, nothing to poo-poo, but certainly would come back crashing back down to earth.
The only thing is that I'm so intrigued by them. Everybody's looking at Cook and those receivers. You return 4 or 3 of your interior offensive linemen. You got to get a young guy that played a lot last year at right tackle, and you're replacing your left tackle. It's just the running game with Marcus Carroll that I'm so intrigued by with them. You think Tennessee can make a playoff?
Yeah, I mean, they are like the ultimate wild card. Like, you got to give Heupel credit since he's stepped foot there, man. He's gotten Tennessee at least back to relevance. He's got them believing again. Them playing, beating Alabama 2 years ago was monstrous. But they regressed a little bit from Hendon Hooker to Joe Milton last year. The offense was not as dynamic. They ran the football well, and I think they'll do that again this year with Dylan Sampson. But Nico Iamaleava, how much has he progressed? It was a great debut in the bowl game to beat Iowa, one of the best defenses, if not the best defense in the country.
No doubt.
But how quickly does he progress? How quickly does the game slow down for him and going through his reads? He's got some great weapons, man. Chris Brazzell coming over from Tulane, Squirrel White, Brew McCoy's back healthy. They got dudes. Tennessee's a dangerous team, man. They're a dangerous team because, a lot of their tough games they get at home. That Oklahoma game earlier in the year, like that first SEC game, that's going to tell us a lot. It's a big game for Oklahoma, and it's a big game for Tennessee. You don't want to start 0-1 in the conference. But if Tennessee wins that one, man, dangerous team. And if you're LSU, be grateful you don't have them on the schedule this year because that's a team I don't think you want to see.
Well, Chris, here's the only thing. And I gave Heupel credit on this because people have overlooked this. Everybody looks at them offensively and what they're doing. Brother, that front seven is nasty. Do you hear me? They got dudes. James Pierce Jr. might be the best DN outside of Nick Scourton, but he's up there with him too. That front seven's nasty. It's just that secondary. All right, last one. You know where I got to go here. Your thoughts on LSU. What do you think the Tigers do this season?
So, I mean, I think I'm like a lot of people. I think the offense is going to be fine with Nussmeier. Yeah, I was listening to ESPN radio this evening, and one of their national guys said, "Oh, well, I mean, Garrett Nussmeier, he could be good, but he ain't Jaden Daniels." And it's like, okay, but how do we know? Like, and granted, he's not like Jaden Daniels. Obviously, no one can do what he did with his legs, the running and throwing ability. But like to just go, oh, well, clearly they're going to take a step back. Okay, well, we just had one of the two greatest quarterbacks in the history of LSU do what he did on the field.
Right.
Can you be 85% of that? I mean, that's kind of like, can Nussmeier still be very productive? It's almost what we thought you lose Joe Burrow, and then that first game, Miles Brennan, they lose to Mississippi State, but he threw for like 400 yards. Like, okay, like we'll take this, but the defense was abysmal. To me, it comes down to the defense for LSU. And I love what they've done with the coaching staff. They've absolutely improved. But, to me, Blake, it's about the Jimmies and the Joes. It's a lot of the same Joes on that roster. I mean, look, two of the biggest losses, I think we just glance over them, but like losing Jordan Jefferson and Mekhi Wingo, those two dudes were huge parts of what you did a year ago. Mason Smith didn't have a great season, but is Gio Paez better than him? No, I would say no. Jacoby and Guillory, I think, can get better this year, but he has got to stay healthy. Like if you lose Jacoby and Guillory for any stretch, my heart went in my throat when I saw he got hurt. What was that, a week ago? I'm like, oh my God, put him in bubble wrap and we'll see you week one. My big thing, Blake, is with the secondary can be average to good. Can I get pressure up front? Can I get sacks? And I look at guys like Savion Jones and Braden Swinson and Paris Shannon, Deshaun Womack. This is a team, Blake, that last year Greg Penn was third on the team in sacks with 4. Like Greg Penn. Perkins had 5.5. Wingo had 4.5. Jones had 2. Swinson had 2. Shannon had 2. I need one of those dudes to emerge and be a 7-8 sack dude. Like, I just do. You need pressure. Like, who's the last LSU true defensive end to have 10, 11, 12 sacks in a season?
Arden Key, wouldn't it be?
Yeah. I mean, it's been a while is my point. I mean, like, where's the Tyson Jacksons? Where's the dudes who like, I got a dude who you are going to have to game plan for, and you're going to have to double team him and all that. And I know Perkins is, he's a sack artist, and they're going to move him around, again, and we expect that. But like my true defensive end, where is that guy? I think losing Omar Spates and Andre Sam is actually a plus. I think, you could get better guys there. I think Jordan Gilbert is a plus. Hopefully we'll see Whit Weeks more. I know
they're running him out there like nonstop. And look, Chris, that kid can fly.
Yeah.
That kid Weeks can fly, man.
Yeah, there were some weeks last year where I look at Brian Kelly and I go, Brian, I know you're a smart guy. What are we doing here? Like, is this, or trying to prove a point? Oh, this guy's got to earn his playing time. The dude can ball. Put him out there. We need dudes who can make tackles. And you got to a point in LSU season, you're like, I need somebody who can tackle. Can anybody tackle? Like, just get out there and go play. I've been hearing good things about Jordan Allen at safety. I like, Ashton Sampson's had a nice offseason. Shout out my fellow Rummel Raider. Sage Ryan and Major Burns still make me nervous when they're in coverage. We'll see. If I get scared a little bit against USC, I can already see Sage Ryan or Major Burns getting beat and them walking with their hands on their hips going, dude, get off the field. But my question is, can this defense be improved? Doesn't have to be dramatically improved, but has to be improved. And again, love the coaching staff, but that coaching staff is working with limited pieces. Can they get the most out of those guys? And I think they can. And if they do, if they get these guys to play above their heads, yeah, LSU, this is a 10-win team, 10-2. I keep making a bold prediction. I think there's a very good chance, Blake, if Jackson Arnold lives up to what he's supposed to be at Oklahoma, we go into that last week of the season in Death Valley. Oklahoma and LSU are 9-2. It's a de facto playoff game. It's a play-in game. The winner of that team goes to the playoff.
I'm with you. Here's the thing, Chris, that I don't want to go here, okay? And I've told people that watch us I'm being very conservative. Brother, they've sent more heat than a crack spoon, okay? And that is what Blake Baker's philosophy has been. Look, I don't know if Savion, like Savion Jones can be that guy. But you're going to have to start explaining to me the sacks that he's had this fall camp. And look, Brian Kelly has gracefully and graciously given us full practices, 14 of the 21 that they had. All right. Now, the thing is, though, when they get beat, right? Like this isn't, and you know what, Chris? I walk out of practice and think to myself, well, you know what? You made 3 stops. I'll live with 2 scores. Yeah. Like I'll live with you. Look, man, just try to win. Stop being so passive. So,
dude, Chris, in Oxford last year, we were like, dude, get 1 stop. Get 1 stop. You win a game.
Dude, and here's what the crazy thing. I'll never forget this since you brought that up. We do post games every week, after every game. People were calling into the show blaming that Jaden fumbled the ball in the first quarter.
Yeah,
I'm like, bro, he had almost 600 yards and 6 touchdowns. Like, what the are you like? What are you doing?
It would have been like in Drew Brees' peak years calling. Well, Brees didn't go 3 and out that one time, like
right. Hey, he threw for 5,000 yards and 40 touchdowns. Like, what are you doing? Like it just baffles me, dude. This is what makes you the best. You are fantastic. I cannot thank you enough for coming on tonight, man. Tell everybody where they can find all your stuff, everything you're doing. I'm always checking in on Locked On. I'm always checking in on your stuff. I love listening to you as my day goes on. But tell everybody where they can catch all your stuff.
Yeah, just follow me on Twitter at Chris Gordy, ChrisGordy. And then, of course, Locked On SEC. We're on YouTube, so we encourage you to subscribe there. Just type Locked On SEC. And, again, talk big picture stuff. We have some great guests. We had a lot of football players from the SEC on this offseason. We had who's my guy? LSU wide receiver, not Shelton Sampson, but the other freshman from a year ago. Of course, Kyle Parker. Sorry.
Kyle Parker. Okay.
I got everything. Didn't have one brain fart this whole conversation. I had a brain fart at the very end. Kyle Parker was on the show a few weeks ago. Tremendous young man. I think he's going to step up and maybe play a role. Maybe he's the number 4, maybe the number 5 this year. But
also touchdown to end the scrimmage on Wednesday.
We'll see what he's going to do. But, yeah, we had him on the show a few weeks ago. You can check that out. Just search Locked On SEC wherever you get your podcasts.
See, I told you, LGZ. I called into the post-game show hammered. See, I mean, Chris, it's never ending.
Well, but in his defense, he probably calls into every post-game hammered. So,
I mean.